Two friends, Alan Dale and Jerry Carew, who grew up just a few streets apart in St. John's East End, have been separated by Canada's geography for 3 decades. They came together virtually during the pandemic to chat about like-minded interests. Alan lives in PEI and Jerry in Newfoundland. Thriving in remoteness has been a common theme for both of them during the pandemic. Gale Force Wins, the podcast is the result.
And welcome to Gale Force Wins. With me, as always, Jerry Carew. How are you, Jerry?
I'm actually enjoying my day. I talk about, it comes back to weather in Newfoundland. For the two gentlemen that are joining us today, that have been here many times, they'll know that. Up to about maybe 12 degrees. I actually had lunch on the deck. So it always makes everyone in Newfoundland feel buoyant when the sun shines.
Yeah, 12 degrees in Newfoundland. They better get filming those tourism commercials now, because you don't have too many of those, right? So that'll be good news. Jerry, listen, in life, you find yourself sometimes in really unusual situations and time and place. You're doing things you never thought you'd be doing. Our next two guests are going to tell us quite an interesting story that finds its way right back to St. John's, Newfoundland. Exciting time 26 years ago at the Crowsnest Officers Club in historic downtown St. John's. We are so pleased to have Derek Moss and Andrew Harreluk join us on the show today. Gentlemen, why don't you introduce yourself? Derek, go ahead.
Thanks, Al. Hi, Jerry. Great to be here. Thank you very much for the invite. My name is Derek Moss. I did 29 years with the Royal Canadian Navy and then transferred to the Canadian Coast Guard a few years ago. As Al mentioned, it all comes back to St. John's. St. John's was like a second home to us back in the 90s. Plenty of good memories. This one particular nugget of a story obviously jumps out, but there are so many more, and it all stems from the people. So we're really looking forward to digging into some of that and sharing it with you.
Now, Derek, they call you Mayday Moss. Why do they call you Mayday?
I don't think I've heard that. I don't think I've heard that before, Al. Well, that goes back, I am one of the few people, much like yourself, by the way, who has been on both ends of a search and rescue, the rescuing end and the rescuee end. So the pride takes a bit of a hit, but at the end of the day, one dark and stormy night, we had to make that call from a sailboat in the Bay of Fundy, and Mayday Moss, the alliteration just took off from there.
Listen,
sorry, Derek, you didn't realize, we kind of turned this around. This is going to be a roast instead of a positive experience.
Well, Jerry, you're lucky that you and I, don't have a lot on each other, but, with Al and myself, there's a certain amount of mutually assured destruction, I'm sure.
I remember the night on the sailboat. I think the last song we listened to was Seal. Kiss of the Rain or something. I can't remember the name of the song.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And we had, and I was singing, when the first call went in, I was singing Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald in the background, which didn't go over well.
Yeah. All I can remember is listening to Seal saying, "This is not the song I want to die to." I was hoping for something by Rush. So Howie, let's hear a little bit about you.
Oh, well, thank you, Alan. And Derek, riveting story, hearing about the Mayday recollection. So Jerry, nice to meet you.
Yes.
As you mentioned, it's a beautiful day in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, 18 degrees. And it's also wonderful season 4. Got to get that in, the King of the North. That's for our Mr. Moss, a big Ottawa Senators fan. Andrew Harreluk, I go by Howie. That's my nickname. I spent 22 years in the Navy, mostly on the East Coast. I've been working for Lockheed Martin Canada since 2011 on Halifax class modernization in the Canadian Service Combatant. Avid hockey fan, and as Derek said, nothing better than talking about past glory. My kids love my stories. They're just riveted all the time. They just sit there and say, "Dad, tell me more." But this is a great story, great memories. It's just like yesterday, but 26 years.
And some of those stories are even true.
They are. Yeah.
So Howie, you were a big hockey player back in the day, weren't you?
Well, I wouldn't say I was a big hockey player, but I play hockey. I thought this year would be my season to crack the squad, but I think my age is catching up now. But
who did you play with in the past?
Oh, I just played locally here, minor hockey, and the Royal Military College. Not the best record, but great 4 years of university hockey. And
what position, Howie?
Some people would say I play left out, but actually, no, I'm a defenseman.
You know, I played forward my whole life, and I rekindled my hockey career about 10 years ago, just playing with a bear league. But I play defense now. I really enjoy defense. I got to say, I used to play left wing. So,
Oh, excellent.
yeah.
There you go. All right, boys. Well, thanks for introducing yourselves to the audience, and thanks for being on the podcast. It's a real pleasure. So I want to put us in a place and time now, and we'll talk a little bit about that particular night. You fellas had just come back from a deployment. I think you're down in Haiti on board the HMCS Terra Nova. The ship was deployed over to St. John's, Newfoundland, to celebrate the 50th anniversary of victory in Europe. Ship pulled into St. John's. You were going to do an old convoy run that they used to do back in the day. And just like back in the Second World War, the officers would all head up to the historic Crowsnest Officers Club, and they'd share a drink together, and they would head out the next morning out to sea and go about their convoy. Of course, many never came back, and we all know the stories of those great legends that went through the Crowsnest. But that particular night, 26 years ago, is a little bit different. You guys weren't going off to war. You were going to relive this historic convoy run. Tell me your recollection, best you can, of that night 26 years ago as you sat in the Crowsnest Officers Mess. Derek, go ahead.
Thanks, Al. You've encapsulated it really well. So we didn't have a vision going into that night at the Crowsnest of the magnitude of the trip that we were going on. We just happened to be in the Crowsnest. It's a place we always would go to whenever we sailed into St. John's, and we knew we were sailing off the following day to a variety of ports in Europe primarily to commemorate the 50th anniversary of Victory in Europe Day. And there were 3 or 4 Canadian Navy ships that were eventually going to Europe. And we were the one, HMCS Terra Nova, that was going to go to Murmansk. And you mentioned the convoy run. So, of course, the Murmansk Run, one of the most famous, one of the most deadly, and just probably one of the most trying runs due to the climate, the weather. You get up there that far north any time of year, and it's cold, it's godforsaken, the seas. So I think an idea came together as we were sitting around. There were 13 of us, as I recall, sitting around in the Crowsnest, along with some locals. One of the he was either a vice president or president of the Crowsnest at the time, and we thought, we should do something special for the Crowsnest, because, like you said, many people before us who actually went into harm's way sat there, and that was probably the last beer or the last social interaction they had before, getting on board their ship and sailing for northern climes and in eastern ports to resupply Europe and Russia. So I don't know who came up with the idea, but we thought, well, let's take something with us from the Crowsnest, and we can take it to Russia, recreate the Murmansk Run with this item on board, and then bring it back, maybe put a plaque on it, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, if it was there was a piano in the corner. Now, not a grand piano, because that wouldn't fit, but a smaller piano. And we thought, that might just do the trick. So we started formulating some ideas about, how to get this piano on board the ship and how we would organize the logistics and approvals for that. So I'll let Howie continue with a portion. We'll probably go back and forth here, and I don't know if our memories are aligned. We haven't shared our story since, so we'll see how much we remember that is alike. But we decided, hey, this small piano, let's put it on board the ship. We'll take it to Murmansk with us. It will be part of the commemoration. We'll bring it back and then present it back to the Crowsnest. So that was kind of the genesis of the idea. And
in theory, it sounds like a great idea. Howie, what's your recollection?
So, Derek, that was very well spoken. I like to call that the mature Derek. That was a great lead in. I'd like to bring the perspective of a sub-lieutenant, a young 24-year-old, with my mentor, my bottom left here, Derek, and actually, I believe, Al, you were there as kind of like our go-to liaison officer every time you pulled into St. John's. So 13, 20 people, I can't necessarily recall on the Crowsnest. What I do recollect is someone came up with the idea of, we need that piano, we need it in the ship, and we need to bring it with us to Russia. And Al was like, I'm on it. So you went over and you were working the president or the vice president. I remember you were talking, you were wheeling, you were dealing the motions, the hand. I mean, you're a great orator. You were speaking. It was a good 20 minutes or so. And I think he came back and he said something to the effect that we have to give him a deposit of $5,000 and the piano's yours. And Jim Heath was the XO, and he turned to, I think it was Harold Degg, and he goes, go get a check. So off he goes to the ship, and he goes and gets that check, and he comes back, and I think Derek can fill in the legality of the check, but it was in a frame, and Commander there, Rick Williams, was the CO, and we presented the check to the representative of the Crowsnest. And then Rick Williams goes to Derek Can, who was the engineer, and he says, engines, you're in charge, get that piano, let's get it on the ship. So it's 59 steps to the Crowsnest. I think it felt about like 259 steps. We had to go out the back door, and we had to lift that piano up over the ledge of the railing. We couldn't just walk it down. We had to lift it up because of the dimensions. And Derek, I believe, fulfilled the role as heckler. So Derek, the engineer, Derek Can, was giving directions and trying to organize the work party. And Mr. Moss over there was, oh, okay, engineer's in charge. He's the engineer. Look at me. I'm a lieutenant commander. But we got it down the stairs and we got it into the back of the truck. And I'll pass it over to Mr. Moss to carry us from there.
So if I could, and it's not to correct Howie, it's just to add some color. The gentleman, the president of the Crowsnest at the time, it sounds like he readily agreed to give up the piano for a period of time. That was not quite the case. We got a firm no, and I'm saying no using polite words. So it took a while and probably several beers that we bought him to get him in the frame of mind where he saw more of our side of the story. And that took quite a while and several beers. So whether or not we got a no from him at the end of the day, it wasn't really the question. We didn't hear a no. We may not have heard a yes, but we didn't hear a no. So we took that as tacit approval. And I do recall Derek Can, our engineer, finding a hammer or a mallet and having to pound out, remove part of that railing. Now, those of you familiar with the Crowsnest, up on that top deck, there's two ways in and out. One is the main staircase inside, and the other is the emergency staircase outside. Well, there was no way the piano was going to fit down the inside staircase. So, the engineer, he took his measurements, etc., as I heckled. And we decided that the safest, the safest and only plausible route for the piano was that outside, what appeared to be a very rickety set of stairs, with about half that upper railing removed. And, in my defense, I did actually do some carrying. I had a bruise here for about 2 weeks from supporting that piano. We brought it down. It went into the back of the truck. Al knew the streets, Water Street, George Street. We just basically did a loop for a while. And, why get a piano unless someone knows how to play the piano? There's not much point in that. So we had asked around before and we had checked, and luckily Howie said, well, yes, I can play. And, had given us a song, and we thought, oh, that was great. Wow, that's really good. And he played this particular song. We got the piano down in the truck and started touring. And this was about, mind you, 9-10 o'clock at night, maybe 8 o'clock at night. So, life in St. John's, life down on George and Water Street was just starting to happen. People were starting to come out. So there are people in the streets. And then this truck goes down with a piano, a bunch of goofs in the back, Howie playing a song. And we serenaded the streets of St. John's for a little while before we took the piano to the ship to embark it for our about almost a 4-month cruise.
How many people were in the work party to get it down the stairs? I recall there was quite a gaggle, almost like a rugby huddle, really, moving it down those stairs.
The number 13 springs to mind. That's why I remember it. I seem to recall someone counting, whether or not it was 20 before in the bar. I seem to recall 13 of us on those stairs, person handling this piano.
And as I recall, it was an international operation. There were some representations there from other navies, was there not?
John Bozeman.
John Bozeman. I forgot about John Bozeman. The angry American.
We had a bunch of sacrificial subbies. That was the plan. We'll sacrifice the subbies to get the piano down. And that.
How did they end up? How did he end up there?
He was part of. So Terra Nova happened to be the flagship. So I mentioned there were 3 or 4 Canadian ships going over to Europe. So we had a staff on board with a Commodore, for lack of a better term, and that Commodore had a staff. That staff always has an American exchange officer, who lives in Halifax. So John Bozeman at the time was that American, and I don't think he'd seen anything like this. And it was a bit of a foreshadowing for the trip to come.
Quick question. So you're saying you were playing the piano in St. John's around 8 p.m. I'm going to really test you now. Do you have any idea how long it took to get down those rickety stairs with that huddle, as Alan said? How long would that have taken? It could have come really quick if it went over the railing. But
it was a good half hour anyway.
Yeah,
it was a good half hour.
Yeah.
I think there was enough time there to go to the base, pick up a truck, and come back. There was enough time. There was ample time to get a required vehicle to take it through the city.
The big yellow D&D Ford F-250.
That's the one. And indeed,
who signed that out?
Yeah, Al.
Okay.
So
came up, Al, did you?
No,
the statute of limitations is worn off on all this.
Well,
that's why you're talking right now, right?
Yeah, that's great.
So I recall the negotiation and a sum of $10,000, but these government procurements, sometimes they get a little confusing. You never know which way things are going. But no matter what, I think it's fair to say that Crowsnest certainly agreed to providing a little bit of history to this piano, would you say?
We were under the impression that there was a verbal understanding, yes. The check was signed and delivered. Now the challenge, and I'm not an accountant, by profession, I have no financial acumen above and beyond the norm to speak of. But the check, to my recollection, was signed by Harold Degg, our supply officer, as Howie mentioned. They attempted to cash it, as you would.
Wouldn't you?
It was refused. What probably Harold knew, but no one else. The check needed to be countersigned, meaning it needed 2 signatures, not just the one from Harold, but it also needed another authority from the ship or the Navy to sign. There was no such signature, therefore it came back void, and that's why it's now framed and on the bulkhead in the Crowsnest.
There you go. Now, of course, a piano on board a ship was nothing strange to the Canadian Navy. In fact, during the Second World War, that's the way it was. And it was only during the Gulf War that all the pianos, as we'll recall, came off the ships to reduce the weight on the ships, if you recall. So putting a piano back on wasn't a far cry for the Canadian Navy. Getting that piano down the stairs, that's a heck of a feat. There was no doubt about it. It goes down to the bottom of Water Street there, and it gets into the back of a pickup truck. And then all people jump in the back of the pickup truck. How will you take your position? What were you playing? And what was going through your mind?
Well, I mean, this was make my mother proud. All that investment in piano lessons when I was young, through my my younger years, culminated in the one song I could recall, Nadia's theme, the theme song from the Young and Restless. Probably the first 1 minute of the song played over and over and over again. It was the Terra Nova go-to. But I would say the disappointing thing, out of the wardroom of maybe 40 or 50 people, it was quite disappointing to think that I had the most talent in playing the piano. No one else could play. It was unbelievable to me that no one else had any talent. And it's very rare that I'm the most talented musician in the room.
So in the back of this pickup truck, going through the streets of St. John's, and I don't know, man, you fellas probably don't remember, but do you remember the Royal Newfoundland Constabulary pulling up alongside?
No.
Yes. Yes, I'm close friends with the Royal Newfoundland Constabulary from back in the day. So I certainly remember, although I don't remember the exchange that happened if there was one.
Oh, I do. The Royal Newfoundland Constabulary pulls up alongside and simply says, "What are you fellas doing?" And I said, "We're going to the HMCS Terra Nova." And he simply said, "Hurry up." So now we pull up in front of the ship, and now you've got to get this piano again with the gaggle of 13 on board the Terra Nova. And we'll all recall that the gangway is not very wide on board the old steamers. Tell me about that little journey.
Well, from what I recall, you mentioned John Bozeman. I believe we almost lost John over the side. He was we were bringing that piano across the gangplank, the brow, and John fell over the side, and luckily caught his foot in the guardrail and was hanging over the brow. But that was quite the ordeal getting it onto the ship itself.
And we're pretty lucky with the layout of the ship in the day, because the wardroom, so the officers' mess on board the ship, was same level as the brow. So you didn't have to go upstairs or downstairs. The brow was challenging enough, but then we could get it into the boat deck, and then the after hatch in the wardroom, we could slide it right in. You couldn't do that with a ship today, just because it wouldn't fit up or down the ladder.
So now you get the thing on board. You wake up the next morning. Is there anybody in there, thinking we should bring this back, or are you happy to let the lines go and head off to Russia at this point?
You could have ended that sentence after the word thinking. Was there anybody in that wardroom thinking? No. Nope, didn't even occur. And look, the reality of it was, no one thought this was a bad thing to do. There was no malintent. There was always the goal to return the piano at the end of the day. So this wasn't stealing as such. This was borrowing, enhancing the story of the piano, the legacy of the Crowsnest, the connection between the Navy and the Crowsnest, all positive in our minds. So at the time, when we cleared lines and set sail out of St. John's, no, there was no thought that that we may have overly upset anyone, or that we were doing anything particularly wrong, because amends would be made.
Do you remember getting up Howie? Do you remember getting up the next morning and thinking, "What have we done?"
No, I mean, it feels like Derek's giving some sort of statement in front of Congress here, but well, if there was one thing we weren't known for, it would probably be forward thinking. So, hey, piano, all right, cool, right? Let's go. So no, it was good. It added some character. We needed character.
So you're saying nobody from the Crowsnest reached out prior to the ship going? There was?
We can get into that in a little bit.
Okay.
So, our conquering heroes slip lines and blow out the Narrows the next morning with the piano on board. Turns out the Crowsnest, I don't think we're necessarily that interested in, we'll call it a lease. I don't think they were that interested in leasing the piano to the Terra Nova, because they had hired a piano player to play once per week. Now, this person was now out of a job. Thanks. And of course,
I did not know that.
Yeah, well, I did, because I had to stay behind, and I fielded a number of phone calls from the piano player as to how they were going to be reimbursed for their services. So off you go to Russia, piano on board. Did it get good play time on the trip over, Howie? Did you repeat the song a few times?
No, I felt like kind of for Rick Williams, it was kind of like his novelty when the captain.
Yeah.
You know, every time we went in there and we were hosting it, it's like, go play the piano. And I'm like, I'm really not good. I really don't want to go play the piano. Just play it, right? And then one time when we were in Murmansk, like there was this young lady that came, and she was like a concert pianist, and she was like playing, and you know, I felt very humbled and like, you know, awe-inspired by her talent. But like, you know, Rick Williams would always say, go play the piano. And I'm like, oh, I really don't want to play the piano. But you know, sub-lieutenant, you got to do what the captain tells you, right?
Captain calls, you must obey. I think there's a song with those lyrics in it. So the piano does its tour, the famous Murmansk Run. And of course, this was in the day before, you know, text messaging and emails. And really, the connectivity to the ship was sparse at best. But I can assure you that on land, there was a lot of conversation going on around the piano and when it was coming back. So you finish your run, and sounds like the piano got a little bit of history while it was gone, and saw some ports, which I think is fantastic. I think the piano and the Crowsnest now, it would not be the same without that story. It would just be a piano in the corner, and there'd be nothing more to it than that. You added quite a bit of value to it for sure. So tell me about coming back. How was that experience? Now you had to go back to St. John's and return this piano. Tell me about that.
So our tour of duty included, so from St. John's, we went to Reykjavik, Iceland. I believe Portsmouth, England was next.
No,
I think maybe up in
Hammerfest,
Hammerfest, Norway,
Murmansk.
and then Murmansk. So at some point along the line, the Crowsnest, you know, finally, you know, failing being able to connect with us on board the ship, reached out to the Admiral in Halifax. You know,
Nice.
Well, that was so that kind of changed the tune for us a little bit.
Right.
So to speak, pardon the pun.
Sail back. Yeah, we were never meant to sail back into St. John's on the way back. I think we were looking at maybe going to Sydney, Cape Breton, or right into Halifax. But of course, the Crowsnest had contacted the Admiral and you know, expressed their light displeasure with us and with the fact that we had absconded with their piano under what they thought were less than forthright circumstances. So the Admiral, you know, rightfully so, ordered us back to St. John's on the way back to return the piano. Well, this was a godsend to us. We get an extra port visit in St. John's. This is our punishment. This is wonderful. So we looked at the road ahead and said, okay, how are we going to do this? Getting the piano down was one thing. Getting it back up the stairs, there was no way in heck that the same group of people was going to be able to do that using the same methods. So we just flat out hired a moving company and said, can you get that piano from the ship back up into the Crowsnest on this date? To which they agreed. We contacted CBC Newfoundland and Labrador and, you know, gave them a bit of a heads up. So they showed up and we made it a bit of a celebration. So the moving company brought the piano back. Then we all dressed up in our high collar whites and medals and tried to look as presentable as possible, and you know, brought the piano back and presented it to them much as we had originally planned, although with a bit more fanfare and humility than we had originally looked at.
Howie, how is your recollection of the return?
It was surprisingly quite similar.
Yeah.
I think it was a very easy $500 that we all voted on for the movers. It was the best $500 we ever spent. I do recall when we pulled alongside and we were using the crane, the Zodiac crane, and the piano was going back and forth, and we're like, it's looking pretty sketchy. This could end up bad, but it got lowered on the jetty, and then the movers took it. And as Derek was mentioning, we're all in our high collar whites, and being the captain's novelty, the CBC was there, and he says, you know, we're all in that picture that Jerry was showing earlier, and he goes, you know, you got to play your nattiest theme, and I'm like, no, I don't want to play it. And he's like, you're not understanding. this, I'm not asking you, like, I'm telling you. And I'm like, oh, here I go. And he goes, don't worry, there won't be any cameras. And I'm like, oh, all right. So I sit down, and as soon as I sit down and about to open up with my my 1 minute of Nadia's theme, on goes the light. There's the CBC camera, and they're recording. And so it was on, the evening news, our presentation, a lot of fanfare, as Derek was saying. And if I, bring in a few hours later, I think I'm at that bar, the Sundance, right? And you saw the picture. I had hair. I was thin. I was kind of dapper. I'm at the bar, and this young lady, she's looking at me, and I'm like, hey, how you doing? What's going on? And I'm like, she's really staring at me. And then she comes up, and she's like, you're that guy that plays Nadia's theme on the news. And I'm like, oh my God. So I guess I was a local celebrity for a night, just for my grade 2 piano Nadia's theme.
Howie, your passion for your craft is unbelievable. I mean, I feel like when you're telling the story, I feel like I'm rewatching the Billie Eilish special on Netflix. You're really a passionate musician. There's no doubt about it. Fellas, have you been back to the Crow's Nest since to see your names on the piano?
I'll go. Derek's not jumping in here. So I came back in 2009, and we had a function at the Crow's Nest, and it's actually I was, and now being an older, more mature at the time lieutenant commander, I had all the sub lieutenants, and I showed them the little plaque on the wall down in the main room, the eating area, and so it was interesting to see. It's a good piece of history.
Yeah, for sure. Derek, how about you? Have you been back to see the piano since?
Oh, absolutely. Last time I was there was summer 2018. I had the good fortune of working about a month in St. John's, and strolled by there, brought a couple of Coast Guard friends with me, and sure enough, HMCS St. John's was in port at the time, and we ran into a couple of those folks whom we knew, and the stories just started to flow again. And like you said, Al, it's a wonderful little piano, but it's, in my opinion, better because of the story. It's got something to anchor it, and to tell a broader story about the rich history of the Crow's Nest in St. John's.
Now, this whole story was once told on CBC Vinyl Cafe, correct? Did you guys ever hear it on the Vinyl Cafe?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, the whole story was told on CBC's Vinyl Cafe a number of years ago. I just happened to be driving. I think I was posted in Ontario at the time, around Toronto, and I was driving. I was listening to CBC in the background, and I heard the story of the Crow's Nest playing out in the background. And my kids were, I think, 4 and 6 at the time, and they didn't believe that I was present in the moment when that was happening. But it's always a nice thing to tell the kids about. You're right, Derek. It adds a lot of history to that one artifact that's in the Crow's Nest, and indeed, it's a real neat story to tell people. As we get a little older and have some stories to pass on to our kids. I think, Derek, you're back now. We lost you for a moment.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So, boys, that's the story of the famous piano. Down the stairs it went, in the back of the pickup truck, through St. John's. One small interaction with the Royal Newfoundland Constabulary. Thank you, whoever that was, that cop at the time, for letting us go. On board the ship, away it goes to Russia and right on back. You guys have added a great deal of history to St. John's, Newfoundland. We thank you for that. Derek, what's next for you in life? What are you doing now and where are you going?
So like I mentioned at the outset, I'm with the Coast Guard. So I work out of our regional headquarters in Montreal. That's where my office is. Although, quite frankly, since COVID started, I've been working out of my home in Ottawa and doing it remotely. So I oversee the Coast Guard fleet operations in Ontario, Quebec, and the Arctic. So obviously, for those who are geographically challenged, no one here I know, Great Lakes, St. Lawrence, and a part of the Gulf, and then the Arctic. So that's what I'm doing now. I've got my head down with a great team working on that. That's keeping me more than occupied. Certainly once COVID lifts, when and if that happens, I'll be looking at, different things perhaps, maybe, certainly within the Coast Guard. But I want to kind of finish my tenure in Montreal and get us through COVID and get the fleet operations done. But I tell you, transferring from the Navy to the Coast Guard, a soft landing for a first retirement, and just a wonderful job and good people.
Good for you, man. The sea is still in your blood and you're making a heck of great impact for Canada. Thanks for that. How about you, Howie? Where are you now? Where are you going?
Well, like I was saying, I'm with Lockheed Martin Canada, working on the Canadian Surface Combatant program. I'm currently the integration test evaluation lead. So it's challenging, it's exciting. It's going to be a great warship for Canada when it gets, as it progresses through all the steps in the program. Finally come to the realization that I have to focus on that career because my hockey career is over. It's disappointing. Part of the other challenges, like Derek, this pandemic year's kind of made the planning for the Stanley Cup parade in Toronto a little troublesome. How we're going to get there, the isolation, the route, the people, the distancing, all those complications that come with the pandemic year and a Stanley Cup championship is, kind of the worry. Kind of worried, but all joking aside, it's looking like a career path at Lockheed till my swan song, whenever that's going to be. But that's what's going on with me there, Alan.
You guys have had a long time to plan that parade. You think you'd have it figured out now, but at any rate, Howie, these new ships are going to be fantastic. We all have served in the Navy. My son just joined the Navy, and I can't begin to tell you how excited I am and a little bit jealous as well. He's about to embark on an amazing career with brand new platforms, and what an exciting time. And Howie, a big part of that at Lockheed Martin. Thanks for leaning into that, and thanks for, you've seen the fleet grow in the past and now being part of the future fleet. That is so exciting for sure. Jerry, your final thoughts, buddy.
Well, I've lived here, and when we walk downtown, one time in particular, I remember bringing my children into the Crowsnest. The one thing besides the German periscope that I wanted them to see was that piano, because Alan over the years have regaled me, with the stories of that. But this has been one of the most enjoyable gale force winds that I've sat in on. The lightheartedness, I think, the measured shenanigans of late 20-year-olds, early 30-year-olds, and the maturity that you both have now and success in your careers goes to show there's so much fun to be had in life, as long as, we don't go too far. So this story is just one that warms the heart, and thanks for sharing it.
Derek and how we always ask our guests to leave the audience with one small takeaway. That one thing you guys have, I would describe your lives, certainly in the Navy and now into your second careers, as lives well lived, for sure. What would that one piece of advice be to our audience? Go ahead, Howie.
Oh, well, I would say embrace the chaos. If anything this last year has shown me is don't take those things for granted. Don't complain. Embrace the chaos and have fun with the small things.
Absolutely. Derek, how about you?
I would just say, when I look back at my life so far, I remember the stories, not the paperwork. So, when you're digging into something, do no harm, but remember the story and have fun.
Yeah, absolutely. The story is an important piece of it all. Well, fellas, I can't begin to thank you enough for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us here on Gale Force Winds. Been an absolute pleasure. The one thing about the Navy that I've always liked is you can meet people along the way and not see them for many, many years. And then this is the case here. We've not seen each other for many, many years, and we jump on this Zoom call and we picked up as if we were sitting in the Crowsnest 26 years ago, right back in that point in time. And that's a fascinating thing, really. It really is. And it's something that I always like to tell people, that when you do things like being in the Navy or being on a professional hockey team or things like that, you make a connection and a bond with people. And there's a real bond here. And I appreciate you being on Gale Force Winds. I'd like to leave the audience with one small thing, and that is, quite frankly, the world needs more Derek and Howie. Thanks, boys. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
Jerry, Al, thank you. Howie, good to see you, buddy.
Thank you for tuning in to Gale Force Winds. That's Gale Force Winds, WINS.com.